Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing, Magic, and Mysticism, to talk to you more about the occult and paranormal. So today I want to talk a little bit about chaos magic, and I referenced it briefly in one of my other videos on Introduction to Sigil Magic. So this is about the principles of chaos magic. So what is chaos magic? Well, let's start with saying what it is not. Upon first glance, first look at the word chaos magic, one might assume, and some people do, that is the act of using magic to cause chaos. Well, I'll tell you that that is not what it's about. It's definitely not that in the minds of people who do chaos magic. So what is chaos magic? Chaos magic is the use, or I say the modeling of chaos. Well, chaos, that's kind of a pejorative word, and in common vernacular we say, oh, she's in a chaotic relationship, or this house is in nothing but chaos. So if you can just set that aside for a second, this is what chaos magic actually is, the modeling of chaos. So what is chaos? It's chaos is flexible, it is sudden, and it is something that chaos magicians believe that one can use in order to facilitate magic, and they'll use different concepts. They may even use chaos theory and mathematics in order to explain some of what they do. But as a rule, or as a rule of thumb, chaos magic is very flexible. So they can take bits and pieces of a lot of different things and put them together, and if it works, and they keep it. If not, then they discard it. So let's talk about the history of chaos magic. So if we go back in time to, I want to say, the earlier part of the 20th century, we have an Englishman named Austin Osman Spare. Now, Spare was an English poet, painter, and occultist at that time, who is credited by chaos magic and magicians for coming with the kind of the rudimentary thoughts and the writings about how to do sigils, how to construct and activate sigils in order to make things happen for magical purposes. He's the grandfather. He is somebody that is highly regarded and looked to as kind of inspiration for chaos magicians. So moving forward in time, after that, we have the 1970s, where you have Peter Carroll, who got together with a few friends, and they came up with the term chaos magic, and what exactly that means, basic tenets, principles, and what it actually involves. So Peter Carroll came along and he wrote certain books. He wrote Liber Null and Psychonaut and the Theater of Magic and one or two others that I can't quite remember right now. However, he is considered the father. He is the one that kind of stands on the throne as somebody that chaos magicians look up to, and he's still around and going strong, doing magic and writing and teaching and all that. Okay, moving forward in time, in the 70s, that is the inception of chaos magic, but it became more popular in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, you have people like Phil Hine, who wrote Prime Chaos, Condensed Chaos, and kind of expanded a little bit on the work of the other chaos magicians and writings and things like that. So he has a lot to offer. So I suggest any of those two books also if you're interested in learning more about chaos magic. Now, in the last maybe last 10 years, you have modern authors, and one that comes to mind that I really like is called Gordon White. Gordon White, his book that I would recommend is called Chaos Protocols. And he also has a website, I think it's called Rune Soup. I've been there a couple times, and he has some blogs and different articles and stuff on chaos magic. So that is a kind of a brief history of chaos magic. So what exactly are the principles of chaos magic? What exactly is it that sets it apart from other forms of magic? Well, one, I already mentioned flexibility. So that's going to be flexibility in your thoughts and in your beliefs, the shifting of thoughts and beliefs, if to shift them if necessary in order to make a magical thing happen. You know, if, in other words, if it were the case that you needed extra power, if you needed extra strength in order to add something to a ritual, and you needed to believe in, let's say you really believe in Santa Claus in order to do it, because Santa brings gifts certain, you know, on Christmas Day. If you needed money, you know, maybe you needed money for, you know, for your children, you know, and you needed to purchase gifts. If believing in Santa Claus, if you could shift your mind to really believe that it's the case and use maybe him as a spirit or as something to use in your work, then chaos magic would say, okay, go with Santa Claus, do it. You know, that is the shifting of beliefs. Now, that isn't always easy, but there is sometimes the suspension of disbelief, as they say in writing, that one has to engage in. One has to pretend that something sometimes is in magic as a to develop and enter a specific model that might work. So it's kind of the as-if frame that we talk about in neurolinguistic programming. So there's that flexibility of thoughts, beliefs, and also flexibility in ritual. You know, chaos magic, also there were many that were rebelling against formal ceremonial magic that said that, hey, you have to have the right robes, you have to have the right candles, and, you know, you have to do these different geometric shapes in order to protect yourself and do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, people spending a lot of money on buying all these different types of things. You know, it takes, you know, hours before you actually get the work done. You know, the chaos magician said that, hey, this is bull. I mean, we don't need to do all this. Let's figure out, you know, maybe an easier, simpler way of going about it. Okay, so the next thing is use what works. Simple enough. Again, in the formal ceremonial magic, they would keep doing the same routine, the same formula, and try to get the same thing to work. Well, what if it doesn't? Well, you know, you don't want to have a magical system that is so rigid that you can't be flexible, and you don't want to be inflexible. Again, we talked about the belief systems. Gnosis, that's a big thing. How could I forget about Gnosis? So Gnosis, that term comes from chaos magic. What Gnosis is a particular altered state of mind that one must engage in order to make magical work occur. So what are the different ways of doing that to get into the altered state? So you have excitory, which would be things like sex, maybe something like chanting loudly, could be dancing, anything that you are activating yourself, you're engaging your sympathetic nervous system, there's a strong response of arousal in your body, and you're using that energy in order to put yourself in a specific state of mind for your next piece of your ritual. Now there's inhibitory too. So you're going to have maybe breathing techniques, meditation, deep trance work, chanting that is slower, maybe kind of mind-numbing, you know, rather than yelling and screaming and through a chanting. That's going to be the more inhibitory. And you may have remembered from my past video about sigil magic that the gnosis is what actually, when you look at your sigil after you achieve gnosis, that is what's going to be kind of like open your mind up in order to receive it and you know, make that magical intent occur. So gnosis, a huge concept in chaos magic. What else? Personal freedom and responsibility. Chaos magic is about the liberty of an individual to try to free him from or her from the confines of what they're experiencing. And that could be Also, I think Phil Hines talks about freeing yourself from the nefarious influences of societal structures, that we are influenced by certain social things that we need to magic to offset that, so that we don't get bound by anything specifically in those structures. So what would that mean? Well, let's say that you were somebody who was subject to racism. You know, chaos magic would say, well, okay, so while you can't affect probably the global your responses of people, but you can use magic in order to carry an aura or to change the influence, your influence over others. Okay. So you can't eliminate it externally, but you may be able to shift it in certain ways. So personal responsibility and personal freedom. Okay, so like I mentioned, chaos magic, one of the things that techniques that became popular is the sigil magic, the use of sigils as a representation of magical intents in order to create a magical purpose and to make something occur which is in line with what you want. Next thing is Servitors. I want to say that Servitors is also something that came out of chaos magic. So I have a video on Servitors that go into more detail about that. I also have a video on the sigils. I think that might have been one of my last two. So check that out. And that's about it. Please subscribe and like, and I will see you in a future video. Thank you very much.